welcome back to the Broadside Podcast. I am Andy Elliott. For those of you who don't know, I'm located in Central Washington State, Yakima area to be exact. And being from and living in Washington, there's been a lot lately that's been happening with this current administration. That's they've been trying to run this once great state into the ground. They're threatening a lot of our rights as citizens of this state with these current bills that they're introducing. And so today, I hope to help introduce you all to a man who, after chatting with, hopes to bring greatness back to this state. And that man goes by the name of Semi Bird. Semi is running for governor of Washington, and he's getting an early jump on things and hopes to give Inslee a good run for his money, which, is probably our money. So join me as, I was lucky enough to get to sit down and chat with Semi Bird on this episode of The Broadside. Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody, and today we have a special guest. I'll just go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Hi, well, Andy, thank you very much. It's good to be with you. My name is Semi Bird, and I'm running for governor for Washington State, and this will be for the 2024 election.
Awesome. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could dive a little deeper, maybe into your personal background and professional background?
Yeah, started out in the inner city ghetto of East Oakland, California, back in the 60s, so 1961. Mom raised me to be strong, resilient, and value-based. And so we moved to King County when I was 7, and I was raised in King County, dropped out of high school in King County, joined the Marine Corps because I felt it was a better path for me. Received my honorable discharge from the Marine Corps, went to college, got my bachelor's degree, 4.0 summa cum laude, so I made up some time academically. 16 years later, I went into the service again, this time the Army. Post 9/11, found myself serving as an Army Special Forces Green Beret. I became a Green Beret at age 43. Left active duty, went reserve status as a Special Forces Intelligence Lead, and took a full-time job with the United States Department of Energy. I worked my way up there to federal director with a GS 14 out of 15 rate, and retired from DOE, retired from the military, but even on reserve status, I had multiple deployments. Went into teaching and leadership at Washington State University. I was an associate director of the department, which was professional development and community education. I created my own firm after leaving there, specializing in leadership development, performance improvement, organizational structure, and again, organizational improvement, and have been a consultant ever since. I have my master's degree in human resource development, several certifications in psychometric assessment. I'm finishing up my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, and that's because my specialty, again, is consulting organizations, and with human beings being the center of gravity of performance in any organization, their attitudes, their mindsets, how they function and focus, that's what I specialize in. So I'm a behavioral scientist right now, and I'm leaning now to focusing all my efforts for the governor's campaign for Washington State. We're getting out early because that's what we need to do. But on that, there's a lot of great things happening, and I'll stop there. But if you have any other questions, I'm with you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like the fact that you're getting out early. I think that gives us a lot of time.
Yeah.
So with all that, what kind of drove you to run for governor? What was the driving force for that?
Yes, so that's a great question. So one of the things I didn't go to is that for years in my county, I live in Eastern Washington now in Benton County, and have been here for probably 28 years now, 27 years. And I had been asked by conservative groups to run for Senate, Congress, at least city council or commissioner, and I said no. And after the COVID-19 panic, that's how I'll put it, because I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction with that information, shutting down schools, etc. My daughter, who was in the Richland School District, she found herself being isolated at home, but we made sure mom was here. That was my wife's choice. And she finished out her last year at 7th grade. And I said, as a behavioral scientist, I wasn't going to let my daughter suffer academically, because I know andragogy and pedagogy and how that works, childhood development. I know that. Piaget's theory of cognitive development, that's my areas of specialty as well. And so we put our daughter in a private school so that she can have in-person education. So the long story short is I did not want to go into politics. I chose to serve our children as a school board director when I was asked. I won the election. I'm currently serving as a school board director. I gave mask choice as a school board director because that was something that I promised during my campaign. I was against the mandates, but I respected and supported anybody who wanted to wear a mask. That's their choice. That's their constitutional right. But that equity was not realized by this administration with their unconstitutional mandates because it didn't take into account the suffering, the mental health illness issues of young people, the lost learning, the isolation, the impact of behavior. And I can go on and on. But as I began my journey as a school board director, finding myself standing with all these barriers of the teachers union and a resistant administration and other school board directors too, to be specific, who are more progressive than focused on children's advancement and parents' rights. That was my spark to say, we've got to do something. I've got to do something. I've been watching our country take a dive for many, many years. And I figured I served my nation for most of my adult life. I bled for my nation in combat, was decorated for it. I gave a lot. I promised the last part of my life for my family. But on that note, what good is that if we have a state that takes away our rights, a state that does not value parents' rights? I had to stand up, and I felt the calling. I believe God has laid out my path for me, and I'm answering that call to serve once again. So my motivation was sparked by a lack of leadership in the state, bad policies, destructive policies, and here I am, my friend.
Yeah, I'm up here in Yakima, and I vaguely remember seeing stories about what you guys were doing down there with the mask choice, which I'm fully behind. My kids aren't old enough yet to be in school, which I'm lucky I didn't kind of have to deal with that whole fiasco. But how would you say many people perceived that decision you guys made there to make it a choice?
Well, great question. And so, at the time we made that choice, the thing I said, because our suicide rate among young people was at its highest. Again, the lost learning, the mental health issues, the isolation, the behavioral issues, this was all out there for everybody to see. And granted, not everybody's a behavioral scientist or a psychologist, but most parents supported us and to this day continue to support us because the response from the progressive, as I call them progressives, which are actually regressives, their choice was to sue us. Their choice was to initiate a recall against us. That was their choice. That was their response. I had been receiving hate mail from the day I was elected, right? And that's because I stood against critical race theory. I stood against isolating children from their parents. And that's what I promised to do. That's why I ran, to protect students' rights and parents' rights. And so I was unafraid. But the response has been great by our community. And I think there's a small group of individuals, like I said, those regressive progressives, supported by the teachers union, elements of the school district leadership. They are allowing teachers in the teachers union to wear recall buttons, political activity buttons on school property. They're allowing, them to sign petitions against existing school board directors. And the two school board members that we serve with, other than the three of us, Audra Bird, myself, and Carrie Williams, who took that vote for students and families, two other school board members who did not support us are supporting the recall movement, and so is leadership of the administration. So we're up against it, but parents are rallying to our side, and I'm honored by that.
Yeah, it always helps to have the support of the parents. Speaking of that, what's your stance on like a parent's choice for school choice?
Yeah, it's actually a platform of my campaign, a platform element. I support school choice. I think school choice, using that word that has been abused, gives equity to all families. And what I mean by that is this. When my child was locked out of schools and restricted from having an in-person education, I had the financial wherewithal and resources to enroll my child in a private school, which is a significant amount of money. A poor family, a family like how I grew up, we could not afford private school unless we received a grant of some sort. So parents who are below the poverty line don't have that option. So school choice is the equalizer. The money follows the backpack, which means if a parent wants to homeschool, they'll have financial resources to support them in that journey. If a parent wants to put a child in a STEM school, right, or any academy that meets the standards, they can do so, and that money goes with them. Right now, it's about $16,000 per child, depending on who you talk to. But I fully support that. Now, that being said, being strongly in support of school choice, again, that's my goal for Washington State. I am not going to abandon public education, but school choice will also bring in competition. It'll bring in accountability because, again, this is a business, and a lot of education organizations won't agree with that. We're in the business of educating children. The more efficient and the more effective we are at doing so, the better the outcomes. So, yeah, we're going to invest in public schools still, because in rural education, small town schools, they don't have private school options. So we need to make sure those public schools have all the resources that they need to be successful for those children and those families, but they also will need to be supported by the state in terms of resource to help them advance their curriculum. You know, for example, just real quick, balanced learning versus structured. So balanced reading is an approach versus structured reading, or structured literacy is what it is, balanced and structured literacy. We're moving in structured literacy, which reduces the loss of or the illiteracy within our school system. But small town schools may not have those resources. Well, as a state, we'll make sure that they have the resources that they need to make sure those educators are trained. And I'm a big fan of also educating parents, getting parents involved. Scientific studies have shown that the more involved parents are in their children's education, the better those children do academically. So we're going to go school choice, but we're also going to support our public school system. We're going to hold our systems accountable to ensure that they are performing to a standard of excellence.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can speak for very many people, but I've noticed that in the last few years after COVID, it seems that some people have kind of lost trust in public education a little bit, and it sounds like that's something you're trying to regain.
That's it. And I really appreciate you saying that. I really do, because there is a loss of trust. And what happened was when COVID-19 happened and that veil, that curtain was pulled back, and parents and families in the community saw what was going on in schools. They saw all these federal dollars being brought in, but at the same time, they saw the academic scores drop. And just to give you a review, and again, I'm spitballing here, but statewide, if you average out all school districts in Washington State, according to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, the amount of students, the percentage of students that met grade level standards for English and language arts was 50.7%. The percentage of students that met grade level standards for science was for math was 37.7%, and science was 42.7%. So when you average that out, we are failing our students academically. Students are failing academically, but yet our graduation rate is 83%. So once parents start to see what was going on, but yet they're still being taxed, right? Where levies and bonds and the community, whether you have children in the school system or not, are still paying consistently, but they're not getting the return on investment. You start to ask, why? What's going on? But then when you also see the focus shift from academics, although it would appear, to social justice, right?
Yeah.
That divisive, whether it's critical race theory or whatever you want to call it, because, there's no critical race theory in elementary or critical race theory for middle school or critical race theory for high school. There's no curriculum that says it. But we know with Senate Bill 5044 that Jay Inslee signed, it specifically said in order to break down or reduce systemic racism in our school system, he's making this mandatory training for all staff within our school system across the state. So they kind of told on themselves what they're bringing into the schools. And my concern is it's lacking accountability to educate children for the reason they're there. They're not there to be indoctrinated or socially engineered. Raising children belongs to parents, right? Those values are based on the household. Our job in a school system is to educate kids. So long story short, brother, and I've been speaking too long on that, but I'll just say this. Parents are very disenfranchised right now because they can see a state takeover of schools instead of schools as they were intended to belong to the community. It seems like schools now belong to the special interest groups of the teachers union and then the state. So we've got to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can feel free to talk as long as you want.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you.
So you mentioned school choice as being one of the platforms. What are some of the other ones that you're running on?
Well, absolutely. So, clearly we have lawlessness. And so we're going to restore law and safe communities, right? We're going to create those safe communities again, because right now we have record murders, record crime. It's off the records. Homelessness is out of control, just like crime is out of control. And so what we're seeing is crime and lawlessness is increasing while academics are decreasing. While on an economic level, which is another platform, this administration continues to raise taxes and add more taxes. As a matter of fact, under the guise of an excise tax, which has been clearly, I guess, uncoded as being an income tax by the IRS, and one of Inslee's appointed judges says you cannot do this as an income tax, and our state constitution prohibits it, but nonetheless, they tried to add that. So I guess what I'm saying is record inflation, but yet we continue to tax people when people are suffering and trying to get food on the table, trying to make ends meet. It doesn't make any sense. They keep adding to the gas tax. So now we're at the top of the list for the nation of the most expensive gas tax. And so it doesn't make sense, especially when we have record revenues. So getting back to homelessness, what we're seeing is we're taking in record revenues, and instead of giving tax relief, we're spending that money at record levels, and we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars to address the homelessness crisis. But yet homelessness in Washington state has increased 10% in the last year. It's been failing, and anybody can drive down the highway, especially on the west side, and see that it's only getting worse. But that's where all of our money's going, to failed programs. So one of the other things I'm going to do in terms of economic growth, I'm going to create opportunity zones, just like Senator Tim Scott worked with our former president, Donald Trump, to create value in the inner city where you have higher levels of poverty. We're going to bring value to those communities, because what we need to understand as a fiscal conservative, the more people that you raise out of poverty, the more money that the state actually takes in. So it's a win-win. We create value for the citizens. We're not leaving them behind. We are elevating them, whether it's programs to bring trade education, certification education with job placement to get these folks off the welfare rolls, right? And so welfare expenditures go down, taxes, tax payments come in from those folks who are no longer living on welfare, but yet they're living on their own, and they're creating value for themselves and their families. So at the end of the day, creating economic opportunity for all is better for all. So we're going to do that. We're going to reduce taxes. We're going to give tax relief. We're going to bring in fiscal accountability. One of the first things we're going to do, probably day one, we'll initiate a procurement of a contractor or a third party to come in and do an audit and assessment of all state programs and all state offices. And that's not to place blame. That's not to go and call for investigations and all that. We don't have time for that. We need to start fixing our state. And so this assessment will tell us, how are we performing? Where's the money going? Are we getting that return on investment? Are we performing as good as we should? Do we even have a strategy of performance? Are we measuring our performance? This, again, is what I do as a consultant. So we're going to bring that. So again, we have education, we have restoring law, safe communities, we have economic growth and opportunity, tax relief, fiscal responsibility. We're also going to have what I call facilitating food and energy security. And so our farming community, right? Water rights, land rights. We're not going to have the Chinese buying up half of Washington state. That's got to stop. And so we have to look at valuing our agriculture community. I think it's the second largest. You didn't say I think. I know it's the second largest industry in the state, with aerospace being number one. But agriculture has always been the foundation of economic opportunity and economic growth for this state. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of our growers and our farmers. And energy. I'm a firm believer in nuclear. Nuclear produces more carbon free. As a matter of fact, nuclear and hydro, we can talk about the dams, why we will never touch the dams. Clean energy. So nuclear and hydroelectricity presents billions of carbon free kilowatts per hour energy. We should be exploring more nuclear, not less. And so these are things that we're going to bring. It's common sense, but understand this. This is important because what we hear from the left quite often is when we bring conservative policies, they try to pitch it like it's subjugating people of color or disparately impacted communities. Oh no, we are bringing common sense policies that's going to elevate all communities. It's going to create value not only for individuals but for the state as well. We clean up the streets, and when we're talking about homeless again, we're going to bring them in to treatment. We're going to invest in mental health infrastructure, drug addiction, and alcohol addiction treatment infrastructure. That's what we need to do, because the root cause of homelessness is not what this administration and many progressives call it, which again is regressives. They call it as a lack of affordable housing. People are not on the street shooting up in their neck because they can't find a place to stay. Okay, we have nonprofit organizations that does a fantastic job of doing that. We are going to address the root cause. This is, again, goes in line with my expertise, right? Understanding the root cause, making decisions based off of real facts and science, not fabricated social science. And so we're going to get them clean. We're going to get them off the streets, because watching them die slowly on the streets, that's not compassion. Giving them needles, which makes us complicit in their slow death, that is the opposite of compassion. That's culpability. And so we're going to get them clean, and we're going to get them a trade, and we're going to get them certifications, and we're going to have job placement, and we're going to put them in housing, a halfway house, as they transition from addiction to independence, to now having a light at their end of the tunnel. All the while, they'll still have that state sponsored, because they can't afford to pay for therapy and addiction treatment. They're going to be on that for the rest of their lives, just like folks who navigate alcoholism, right? They'll always have that coin in their pocket to remind them of that amazing journey that they're on. So we're going to give people their lives back. And imagine that, cleaning up our streets, bringing real compassion to those people who are suffering and dying slowly. We're going to do that in Washington State with common sense policies. So there's a little taste of my platforms. I kind of throw a lot at you, but I love any question you have.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I can get behind everything you said, and especially some common sense. There's a lot of lack of that going on, especially with like, you know, still requiring someone to have the COVID vaccine to get a state job. You know, like if they got it a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
they can get the job. But if I got COVID a month ago, who now I still carry the antibodies,
Mm-hmm.
I can't get that job. It's just it seems like we're lacking quite a bit of common sense.
Well, absolutely. And that goes away. So I'll be very clear in that. If a person wants to get a vaccine, vaccine away. If a person wants to wear 6 masks to work, mask up and rock on with your bad self. What I'm saying is Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution talks about the power. It's inherent in the people, but it also talks in that last sentence, that the role of government, which we derive our power, our just power, by the people, our role is to preserve and to protect the individual rights of citizens. It's not to impose medical treatment. It's not to impose mandatory vaccines or masks on them. And then worse yet, to hold their careers, their livelihoods over their head. Imagine this. Telling someone who went to school, who got a trade, who worked hard, paid for their education, took responsibility for their lives, and we're telling them, you know what? Yeah, you need to get a vaccine, or else you lose your job. And by the way, we already know what the science is telling us. And again, the science, it's funny how once we went into post-COVID operations, so to speak, all the real science came out. Masks never worked to stop the spread of COVID, right? You could read it in the box, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The particulates that go right through it. So common sense, we knew it. And then vaccination, myocarditis, I can go down the list, the complications and how it was reported and how hospitals reported it or did not report it. A lot of things were spun and manipulated. And again, at the end of the day, I don't want to make this a political statement, but I want to take it back to common sense and the Constitution. We have a right to choice in this state when it comes to vaccines and masks and our livelihoods. And it's a constitutional right. And the role of the governor and government is to protect those rights. And so, no, I apologize again for going all long on that, but it's something that has bugged me from the very beginning. Again, as a consultant, I had hospital clients that were dealing with this, a shortage of nursing, but yet we're going to fire nurses because they chose not to get a vaccine. That makes no sense. Again, causing more hardship on our medical capabilities and responses and care that we could offer, especially in rural communities. These decisions weren't thought through. And shutting down our economy, we already saw the damage to schools and to those students. They were set back years again, but they have no compunction to graduate these failing students at a rate of 83%. They're not taking ownership or accountability of the small businesses that collapse because of this. And imagine that. You save up your entire life for your dream of having your own business. And small business accounts for 50.7% of all employees in the state. So small businesses are a big deal. And to make that clear, because they employ more people. These are people like you and I who go out on a limb, take on all that risk, and they're creating value for others within their community by hiring them. And what do we do as a state? We shut them down. And my business was one of them. My consulting firm, I had this beautiful office and a nice glass building. And I couldn't go into the building, but yet I was paying thousands of dollars every month. I was still paying thousands of dollars for my employees. And I promise you this, the PPP, federal monies, didn't make a ripple in that pond of expenditure that my business was dealing with. So it hurt a lot of businesses. And so I'm really fired up about it. We're going to rehire anyone who lost a job. We're going to justly compensate them for lost wages because that's the right and just thing to do. And we're going to move on and we're going to do better. And we're going to take the lessons learned from this whole COVID-19 nightmare and we're going to be a better state. And again, when I say a better state, that's a better state for all citizens, regardless of race, creed, color, or religion or ideology. It does not matter. Get behind us, get with us on finding solutions to address these issues. And we're already writing out legislative platforms so that once we get elected, I'm ready to go right into that legislative chamber and call for action to hold our legislators accountable to advocate for creating value for our citizens, their constituents.
Yeah. I mean, I'm loving it all, man.
Randy,
Yeah.
it's keeping it real, and like
Yeah.
I said, it's common sense. And here's the thing: these are things. If you stop and think about it, if you get past all the politics, and I like to say, it's time to start putting people over politics. You set all that politics aside, and at the end of the day, I don't care what the color of your skin is. If you have a child in the education system, you want the best quality education for that child. That has nothing to do with your political affiliation. It's the same thing. Regardless of your politics or your race or whatever, you deserve safe streets, clean streets. And back to business, imagine what happens. Because you've seen Seattle. It almost looks like, a Snake Plissken movie, right? Escape from LA or New York or something, right? You have dope drunk addicts bent over, hunched over, needles in the streets, garbage everywhere, the smell, defecation in the streets. It's unsafe. It used to be a tourist attraction. We will make it the tourist attraction diamond of the Pacific Northwest within the first year to 2 years of our administration, because we're going to heavily market the state as soon as we clean it up. We're going to bring so much wealth and value to this state, and those revenues are going to be shared with all of our citizens who work hard. We'll make sure we're giving that tax relief. We are going to, when I say we're going to share the wealth, we're going to give it back, because who pays the taxes? The people that we serve. And so when we take in record revenue, after we preserve our streets, after we preserve our rivers, we preserve our environment, we make sure we're preserving and elevating people out of poverty. The rest of that money goes right back to our citizens via tax relief. And there's so many ways that we can do that. And giving tax relief to our small businesses. One of the things I'm going to do is, in terms of B&O tax, which is, the taxes that business pay just for operation, and it's based on the category of business that they operate in. For the first year, when you have a new business, we're going to give you a 1-year free, no tax payment. Why? Because most small businesses fail in the first year. And the reason they fail in the first year is because of all of their expenditures, equipment, as they're building their client base and their customer base. Again, as a consultant, as a business professional and organizational improvement professional, I know this. And so now we have the solutions to give those value added policies to support our small businessmen and women.
Yeah, so it's funny you say. I just started my own business just under a year ago. I went through the whole process of getting my federal firearms license, in hopes to, open like an outdoor hunting store, and now heavily, not only are our First Amendment rights, but now our Second Amendment rights are also pretty heavily under attack by the Democrats.
Yes.
So I don't know what your thought is on some of these gun control bills that are going through.
Yeah. So what I say, and folks on the far left may not like it, and I don't want to rain on their parade, but we are a constitutional republic. And you mentioned the Second Amendment, and the folks who don't understand, I try to tell people, we don't need to rewrite the Constitution. We need to reread the Constitution so that we understand. We look at our history, right? This country was founded based on the citizens of the colonies rising up against their tyrannical oppressor, right? We rose up against one of the most powerful countries in the world, right? Great Britain, and we won. And so when we formed our Constitution, right, our founding fathers said, wait a minute, right? The Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments, we're going to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes. And so the right to bear arms is there for a reason. It's number 2, right? And so it told you what they value: free speech, right? The right to bear arms. And then we went into our personal protections of search and seizure and due process and all those other things. But no, we don't mess with the Second Amendment, because at the end of the day, criminals will never have a problem getting guns. And statistically, and I love analytics and statistics and science, because it brings fact-based information so that leaders like me can make better decisions. And the facts remain. Folks who are law-abiding gun owners are not the ones who are going out committing gun violence. That's a statistical fact. And folks who have firearm safety training have an overwhelming low risk of accidental discharges or accidental deaths. So we're not going to mess with that. And for Washington State, Article 1, Section 24, it goes even more into depth in terms of our rights as Washingtonians to bear arms and to protect ourselves, our family, and our property. We can't mess with that. And so knowing that guns don't kill people, people kill people, and understanding that the American Psychological Association, to which I'm a member of, they did a huge study on this. The individuals that commit gun violence goes back to social issues, behavioral issues, societal issues. It's not controlling weapons. And lastly on this, again, more science, more numbers, more statistics, and hold me accountable because I'm going off of memory here. But knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Look at Chicago. We all know this.
Oh, yeah.
Chicago is one of the murder capitals of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've had gun control on their books for years and years and years. But yet it's crazy over there. The murders every weekend, which again resulted in their mayor being removed and replaced because it went crazy. It was Armageddon. So no, it's not a guns issue. It's not a weapons issue. It's a people issue. So taking weapons from, again, law-abiding citizens, which have a constitutional right, both state and federal, to have those weapons to protect themselves and for hobby, right? There is nothing wrong with it. We're shooting at targets. We're not shooting at people. So no, we will never touch the Constitution. But there are things that we can do to prevent gun violence, and that's where we should be focusing on. Taking the science that we know to go in early and bring preventive measures to help people understand how to operate weapons if that's what they want to do. But also, when we talk about social economic issues that often lead to gangs and gang violence, let's start going into the inner city and working in those communities, giving value to them. There's so much we can do. And I'll tell you that correlation between social economic strife that leads to gun violence, it leads to crime, it leads to all kinds of things. It leads to building up the welfare ranks. And by the way, I'm going to go back a little bit on our campaign platform when I alluded to welfare reform. We're not going to leave people hurting or hungry. That's not going to happen. We're literally going to invest in them because making sure everyone has an opportunity to reach the American dream. And so part of that program that we're saying social economic, imagine this, when you bring hope back into communities who believe and felt that they have been left behind and they advance, you're not going to see them on the streets shooting one another. You're not going to see them robbing banks because they have a life. They have a light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to bring hope back and we're going to protect our constitutional rights.
Yeah, it's a huge in my world of hunting and stuff like that, and sometimes you get into an echo chamber of people, but a lot of the conservatives and people I know feel like ever since mail-in voting around here that the conservative side of the state really doesn't have a voice. And, I get a lot of people who talk about, well, why do I even need to go and vote? It doesn't matter anyway. But is there something you're kind of have in mind to, make sure that conservative voices can be heard? And then to pile on another question is, what about something to do with, voter ID or election integrity?
Yeah. So first and foremost, election integrity is a paramount right to all citizens, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. We all want our election system to be bulletproof, above reproach, audit proof. And I'm a fan of forensic audits. I'm a fan of using cameras at key elements of vulnerability. So, we go back to being in special forces. Well, in special forces intelligence, people would call me a security expert. Threat analysis, vulnerability assessment. These are the things I can do. Looking at a system, I can identify vulnerability. And so we would look at similar to a chain of custody when we talk about a voting system, from the right voter voting, right? Voter ID, just as an option. What happens with that ballot once it's mailed in? Mail-in ballots versus in-person ballot. It goes back to, again, a chain of custody. Understanding that what we call in lean methodology, that value stream, so we can look at what's working and what's not working and how we can improve it. Election integrity belongs to everybody. It will happen in Washington State. As a leader of the state, I will make sure it happens. And I already gave you an example, all the way down to using technology if we have no choice but to use those systems. But it's already been proven that in-person voting is safer. It's less likely to have any kind of irregularities. So this is not election denial talk here. This is election integrity talk here, which it benefits everyone. So I am a fan of making sure that everyone who votes under the law is qualified to vote under the law. I have no problems with voter ID. And as a man of color, right, an American man of color, it bothers me when I hear liberals say, well, what about the Black people? And I want to say to so many people, I'm just going to say it at the risk of being honest, which I don't mind risking that every time and all the time. You know what? Black folks are just as capable as anybody else. Same thing with Hispanic Americans, Chinese Americans. Stop the segregation and divisiveness. Stop isolating groups and labeling them. We are equally capable. And a black person, a Hispanic person, any person can go get a voter ID. We can get a driver's license to drive. We can get a voter ID to vote. If you value our voting and our election system, you will support this. And if you know what, if the person needs a ride, let's find out to get them a ride to get a voter ID. I don't mind that. But to say that a person can't get a voter ID because of the color of their skin, it's as wacky as it sounds. So I'm kind of tipping my hat on where I stand on that. But election integrity, again, is for all citizens, not just for conservatives. And to our conservative brothers and sisters who will say, I don't know if it's even worth it. Oh, my friends, there's so many studies out there that say we have more conservatives in this state than we don't. So stop and think about this. If we look at the sheer number of votes, because in the primaries, it's a jungle election, which means that whoever the top two are, that's what goes. Whoever gets the most votes, that's what goes. And so think about what we're saying. As a soldier who has served and bled for this nation, I gave all for my country because I believe and I love my country. I don't quit. I don't want you to quit. So don't fall in line with this defeatist belief that we're all doomed. Don't give up. Now is the time, more than ever, to rise up. Make sure that your vote is heard. Make sure you submit that ballot, submit it early, go online, check that it was received and validated, right? And if you want to get a triple check, talk to that county auditor. Have her or him tell you, I'm seeing it, because I know our county auditor here in Benton County, Brenda Chilton's a wonderful, wonderful leader. She takes care of all citizens. And so there's a lot we can do. And then on that, lastly, barring any more questions, which I'm happy to answer, I'm going and visiting with every county auditor in all 39 states of Washington State, all 39 counties of Washington State. And the reason I'm doing that is because not all auditors are the same. Although there's commonality in terms of what state requirements are, I want to know as a candidate, and we will be one of the last two candidates. We'll be in that general election. So I want to know where the vulnerabilities are in every single county. Number one, it helps me to understand that, again, that chain of custody, the vulnerability of every county in the state. And so that my team can bring forth a strategy. I will ask those auditors, where can our poll watchers stand? What can we do? We will train our poll watchers so that they understand. And here's one more thing on this. This nasty term ballot harvesting, right? I'm going to call it community voting initiative, right? Because ballot harvesting in Washington State is legal, meaning if you support folks who don't have access to get their ballots to a drop box or what have you, we can help do that. I think it's time for conservatives to get wise and understand the laws of the state and utilize the laws of the state to ensure that every citizen's vote is counted. So participating more and not less, this is how we win. And once we get into office, you folks will have my assurance. It's the same thing I did when I got elected to the school board. I promised the strategic plan. I promised mass choice. I promised academic accountability, program improvement, financial budget transparency. I can go down the list of the things I promised, and you will see that we've accomplished every single thing I promised. It's not going to be any different for the governor's race. Once we get elected, everything that I promised during the campaign, why would I not do it? Because I was elected and those promises made. Election integrity is right there at the top of the list. And again, that's not for Republicans. Election integrity is for all Washington citizens. Everybody wants it. Everybody deserves it. It's their constitutional right to have an election system that is free from fraud or free from issues.
I absolutely agree, and I always kind of get frustrated when I always look up after an election and I dwindle down to find the what's the word I'm looking for, the how many people showed up to vote, right? Like the percentage of registered voters that actually voted. Just pulling my hair out seeing the numbers, in some of the counties on this side where we might gain a bit, but. So to kind of actually get into the woods, the pun intended, this is kind of a hunting podcast that I started. So, and feel free if some of this stuff you're not quite up to par on yet, or let me know. But we have a wildlife commission that is appointed by the governor.
Nine
and
commissioners, right?
yep, and they decide our fate as outdoorsmen and women, and it's clearly one-sided commission with people that have some of them don't even know what time of year the hunting seasons are, and they're I mean, allegedly, but clearly anti-hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of us are getting really frustrated. We've lost a spring bear season, um, and they basically spat in the face of the state's biologists
Mm-hmm.
who recommended this season.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is what can we see looking forward? And a lot of the commissioners aren't even they haven't been what's uh, like confirmed. Sorry, by the
Yeah.
Senate. I
Yeah.
guess for us as outdoorsmen and women, what can we expect? For you to for our future as hunters.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And so, again, in transparency, I'm not a hunter. I was a city boy, right?
Yeah.
I started out in the ghetto and just went to another city, Seattle, right? And so I was never a hunter. I can tell you, I know my way around a weapon. I've been a designated marksman. My first deployment was as a sniper team leader. My next deployment and several after, I was a designated marksman on a special forces team. So I know my way around a weapon, and I value and respect weapons. What the tie into this is that while I do not hunt because of what I used to do in combat, that's a choice. It's a personal choice for me.
Yeah.
That being said, hunting is a tradition. Hunting, it's not just a tradition, a generational tradition. It's also a right of citizens, and it goes back to the beginning. And this sounds crazy, but it's true. The beginning of man, right, and woman,
Yeah.
right? Hunting, foraging. This is the nature of societies and civilizations as we have developed over the centuries. It hasn't changed, but also, hunting has a direct correlation to wildlife preserve. If you stop and think about it, right? The predators, right, versus non-predator species, right? You'll find in certain communities and habitats, your deer population is down. Why? Or elk population. Why? Because predators, right? Because state policies are mitigating hunters' opportunities to again take out predators. And so, long story, I will never touch hunting rights. If anything, as a governor, I need to well, shoot, I already know this. This is common sense. So let me just say this and I'll go back to my other point. When it comes to hunting and fishing, hunters and fishermen know more about preserving those preserves, that wildlife, those habitats, more so than anyone else. Why? Because it's their livelihood or it's a generational hobby, right? Or tradition. They know better than most. And that goes to these 9 commissioners. How many of those commissioners are experienced hunters, right?
Yeah.
Know anything about the wildlife except from a progressive habitat preservation. And when I say that, I am all for habitat preservation, right? But we're not going to put PETA people on a commission, right? Because what do you think they're going to say about hunting? They're going to do away with it. And right now, based on everything that I've studied, and because I'm not a hunter, I made it a point to study, to look into, to research. I know what Lorna Smith has done, coons, et cetera, et cetera. I know about I think they stopped the bear tags or something. Was it last February or something?
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And they're going against decades of proven science that determines the value that has proven the value of hunting in terms of our ecological system. Am I still correct so far?
Yep. Absolutely.
And so when you bring in special interest to influence an industry that citizens create so much value from without having that expertise from a citizen's or a hunter's perspective, how does that make sense? That's almost like having, solely teachers approve curriculum with no parent improvement. Well, who's that curriculum for? Children. Who has the highest regard for children than a parent or a grandparent? No one. And of course, our teachers are amazing and they love and care for children, but you get my point, right?
Absolutely.
And so, very similar to hunting. Who knows and cares more about wildlife preserves than hunters and fishermen? So that is my standpoint. I may not be a hunter, but I understand the value of hunting. I understand how it relates to our ecological system. And so I will not be a hindrance. I will be an advocate. And what's important is there is a balance. There is a balance. And that's where you talked about the state biologists who wasn't listened to, right? Or scientific minded people who have this information. But because it goes against an ideological belief or a special interest, that voice is not heard. It's almost taken me back to COVID, right?
Yep.
And so we need to have a balance to where we're saying what is right, what works, and it's not rocket science. You can see when you allow predators to go unaddressed and you start to see a shortage of other species, we've messed something up, right? Something's not working. And very similar also, who cares more about the forest than loggers?
Yeah,
right? So why are we messing? Why are we messing with that? You want to talk about forest management, right? We already know why fires are going more and more and more, or up, and people want to say, well, it's climate change. Well, we're not managing our forests. We all know that. You know, that's the beauty of logging. You clear it out, right? And then we have all these organizations that replant because it's in their best interest. Again, we need to understand the balance. We preserve our environment. And I'm going to make this statement, and you please tell me at any time if I'm off point. Again, I would think that a hunter and a fisherman wants pristine rivers and lakes, wants our habitats protected and our natural environment protected, clean and beautiful. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're hitting the nail on the head.
And that is it. So again, we will never compromise our hunters' right to hunt, or our fishermen and women's right to fish and to take advantage of God's country that we are so blessed in the Pacific Northwest, and that balance of understanding that we're going to look at the ecological system of different species and habitats and how they operate and what those needs are. But we're not going to do away with generations of hunting for the sake of special interest groups whose cause, and it's very clear, as you alluded to, and I've been reading, right? They're putting people there who have been against hunting from the get-go. That's organizations that they come from.
Yep.
And so there's no secret. I'm not trying to call conspiracy. What I believe is this: they just have a different view. I take a common sense view, plain and simple. And I talk to the people who are going to be affected by the decisions that I make. Instead of making a decision from ignorance, I will own up, like I just did. I'm not a hunter. I know how to shoot. I'm a pretty darn good shot, right? Out to 1,000 with a 7.62, right? 175 grain. I got a little bit of memory left from the old days, but no, I know what I know, but what I don't know, I will find out, and I will find out from all sides, not one side. And then as a leader, I will make a common sense decision with the goal of creating value for all sides if possible. But common sense must prevail, and the real science must prevail. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully I answered your question, but ask me anything else relative. And if I know it, I'll tell you. If I don't, I'll tell you that too.
No, that was perfect. That's exactly what I was asking. And so I reached out to a couple of people and mentioned that I'd be talking with you. And, I wanted to get I guess I surveyed a couple people to see what question they might want to ask.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the general consensus was, could you ever see an amendment to the state's constitution that protects the rights of the citizens to hunt and fish?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Because, again, in an amendment, that is preserving an unalienable right. That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
So, and again, I'm a constitutionalist, as you all probably know. And so I'm not a fan of messing with the Constitution. I'm a fan of making sure everybody understands it. But there's times to make a calibration in order to protect, right?
Yep.
And so hunting and fishing is an unalienable right. Again, going back from the dawn of time. And would I consider it? Would I support it? The answer is yes. As long as we can justify creating value, which on its face, the answer will be yes. But we want to do it in a very inclusive way. And using that term has rubbed people in different ways. But again, I'm not going to allow people to kidnap good English And so that means we're going to hear from all sides. We're going to make a decision. And I think we can do this. Shouldn't say I think. I know we can do this, because preserving hunting and preserving our wildlife and preserving our habitats and our environment, our ecological system, that goes hand in hand. It's all intertwined. And so creating value for one is creating value for all. If you don't preserve the habitat, you won't have a place to hunt, right? So that's how I could justify it. And that's why when I say I'm going to be inclusive in this, I want to listen to everybody. But to do the right thing is to do the right thing. And very similar in talking about state constitutional amendments, another one right off the top of my head, and I almost twitch as I'm saying this, because I don't like to mess with constitutions, but you know what? We've done some great things with amendments in the past for very good reasons. Term limits. Right? We need term limits in Washington State, in my opinion. I don't think a governor should be able to run more than 3 terms. I think the first year you're listening, you're observing, you're learning. The second year you're taking action, you're norming, and you're performing. In that third year, you're putting the icing on the cake, and you're already looking for your replacement. Right? You're tightening up the bow, and you're getting ready to hand that baton off, because you've already created value and excellence for the state. Now it's time to move over and let another citizen in. So, an amendment to Article 3 of the state constitution to impose term limits would be something that I would be a fan of. Now, naturally, people need to understand power is inherent in the people, Article 1, Section 1. So my ideas and my opinions should never overstep the ideas and opinions of the citizens who I serve. Again, that is defined by law in the Constitution. So doing something that creates value, I hope citizens will see value in term limits to ensure that citizens are rotating in of the people, by the people, for the people, a little Gettysburg Address. I think it warrants consideration, and that's one of the second things I'm going to do after calling for that audit and assessment, is to look for improvements such as term limits for the office that I will hold. I think it's the best way to do it, because it shows a selfless act. This is not about protecting myself. It's about protecting our citizens by making sure leaders are held accountable. I think term limits is one way to do it. You can look at our current president, who I believe has spent most of his life in politics, and we can see how that's working out for the nation. And so there is a time and a place to say enough's enough. Thank you for your service. Next citizen, please. We need to continue to rotate. We need to continue to improve. But this nation, this constitutional republic, right? This is how we were formed. We are a constitutional republic of the people. That's why, our Article 1, Section 1, why that has so much magnitude. Who holds the power? It's the people. And so if the people want an amendment, the people will vote on it. It is my job to bring leadership and to make recommendations and to improve functions and performance of government. I need to be held accountable. I'm willing to, and I will call for it. But I'm not opposed to making amendments they have to be something that is very, very important and creates value for our citizenry. It's got to make sense, because it's almost a taboo to mess with the Constitution, because it's so well written. But I'm not limiting it. And so to your answer, yes, I would.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the term limits. That was actually something I meant to ask earlier, and I totally spaced it. But I mean, I could talk to you forever. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I just wanted to say, I appreciate you coming on here and giving time to answer, the questions that I had. I think for a lot of us, we've kind of been losing some hope in how this state's been going, and I feel like you're kind of a beacon of hope that we all need right now.
Thank you, Andy.
You have my support. I'll be marching down there to vote for you.
I love it.
And I hope that you are the one we can put in there to get citizens of the state back as a priority. So
we will, Andy, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate your support, and I appreciate this opportunity. I love giving voice, and in such a way with a down to earth person like yourself, because that's my default. We got to stop electing career politicians and start electing career Americans. That's another shift that we need to make, right? We have to stop thinking that politicians are better than us, because they're not. They're supposed to be us. And so for us to be able to sit here as brothers and patriots and citizens, and by the way, that word patriot, you can be a Democrat and a patriot, an independent and a patriot, and a Republican and a patriot. So patriotism is not reserved for one party. patriotism is preserved for all citizens. And we are two patriot brothers talking and having fellowship about what we can do to save our state, to create value for all. And I hope that your listeners go to birdforgovernor.com. We are the campaign right now. I'm happy to report we are the only viable campaign to unseat Jay Inslee. You can go to the website and see why, right? And then the other thing, again, I like statistics and facts. We are the only campaign that is consistently bringing in small donor, grassroots donations. And to that, anybody who listens to your podcast, please go to our website, click on it, give me 500, whatever you can give, right? It's $2,000 per person per household, whatever you have, give. And the reason I say that is this: I'm driving all over the state. I'm investing in our campaign. We have an amazing campaign team. We have an amazing strategy. But again, this has to be grassroots. This is how we win, when we rise up to take back an amendment or to a constitution is great. But what we have in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, that power is in our hands. Please take and utilize your power by voting, by contributing, by supporting our campaign. Because if you stand up, Washington, we will win. And we're already making history in Washington State just by starting this campaign. So, Andy, thank you, and God bless you, brother. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. You've got me all excited. I've got my own T-shirt on its way from birdforgovernor.com. So.
Oh, I love it. Good man. It's a good one too, huh?
Oh yeah.
All right, my friend. Andy, you take care, and I'm here for you. You ever need anything, I'm back with you anytime.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.